Thomas Telford FRS, FRSE, August 9, 1757, September 2, 1834, was a Scottish civil engineer, architect and stonemason, and a noted road, bridge and canal builder. After establishing himself as an engineer of road and canal projects in Shropshire, he designed numerous infrastructure projects in his native Scotland, as well as harbours and tunnels. Such was his reputation as a prolific designer of highways and related bridges, he was dubbed the Colossus of Rhodes, a pun on the Colossus of Rhodes, and, reflecting his command of all types of civil engineering in the early 19th century, he was elected as the first president of the Institution of Civil Engineers, a post he retained for 14 years until his death. Telford was born on August 9, 1757 at Glendinning, a hill farm 3 miles east of Eskdalemuir Kirk, in the rural parish of Westerkirk, in Eskdale, Dumfriesshire. His father John Telford, a shepherd, died soon after Thomas was born. Thomas was raised in poverty by his mother Janet Jackson, died 1794. At the age of 14 he was apprenticed to a stonemason, and some of his earliest work can still be seen on the bridge across the river Eskdalemuir in the Scottish borders. He worked for a time in Edinburgh and in 1782 he moved to London where, after meeting architects Robert Adam and Sir William Chambers, he was involved in building additions to Somerset House there. 2 years later he found work at Portsmouth Dockyard and, although still largely self-taught, was extending his talents to the specification, design and management of building projects. In 1787, through his wealthy patron William Pulteney, he became surveyor of public works in Shropshire. Civil engineering was a discipline still in its infancy, so Telford was set on establishing himself as an architect. His projects included renovation of Shrewsbury Castle, the town's prison, during the planning of which he met leading prison reformer Job Howard, the Church of St. Mary Magdalene, Bridge in Orth and another church, St. Michael, in Madley. Called in to advise on a leaking roof at St. Chad's Church Shrewsbury in 1788, he warned the church was in imminent danger of collapse. His reputation was made locally when it collapsed 3 days later, but he was not the architect for its replacement. As the Shropshire County Surveyor, Telford was also responsible for bridges. In 1790 he designed the bridge carrying the London Holyhead Road over the River Severn at Mintford, the first of some 40 bridges he built in Shropshire, including major crossings of the Severn at Bilduwas, and Bridge in Orth. The bridge at Bilduwas was Telford's first iron bridge. He was influenced by Abraham Darby's bridge at Ironbridge, and observed that it was grossly over-designed for its function, and many of the component parts were poorly cast. By contrast, his bridge was 30 feet, 10 meters, wider in span and half the weight, although it now no longer exists. He was one of the first engineers to test his materials thoroughly before construction. As his engineering prowess grew, Telford was to return to this material repeatedly. In 1795 the bridge at Bidley in Worcestershire was swept away in the winter floods and Telford was responsible for the design of its replacement. The same winter flood saw the bridge at Tenbury also swept away. This bridge across the River Tame was the joint responsibility of both Worcestershire and Shropshire, and the bridge has a bend where the two counties meet. Telford was responsible for the repair to the northern, Shropshire, end of the bridge. Telford's reputation in Shropshire led to his appointment in 1793 to manage the detailed design and construction of the Ellesmere Canal, linking the ironworks and collieries of Wrexham via the northwest Shropshire town of Ellesmere, with Chester, utilising the existing Chester Canal, and then the River Mersey. Among other structures, this involved the spectacular Ponsey-Silt aqueduct over the River Dee in the Vale of Langland, where Telford used the new method of construction consisting of troughs made from cast iron plates and fixed in masonry. Extending for over 1,000 feet, 300 meters, with an altitude of 126 feet, 38 meters, above the valley floor, the Ponsey-Silt aqueduct consists of 19 arches, each with a 45-foot span. Being a pioneer in the use of cast iron for large-scale structures, Telford had to invent new techniques, such as using boiling sugar and lead as a sealant on the iron connections. Eminent canal engineer William Jessup oversaw the project, but he left the detailed execution of the project in Telford's hands. The aqueduct was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2009. The same period also saw Telford involved in the design and construction of the Shrewsbury Canal. When the original engineer, Josiah Claus, died in 1795, Telford succeeded him. One of Telford's achievements on this project was the design of the cast-iron aqueduct at Longdon-on-Tern, predating that at Puntsyseld, and substantially bigger than the UK's first cast-iron aqueduct, built by Benjamin Uldrum on the Derby Canal just months earlier. The aqueduct is no longer in use, but is preserved as a distinctive piece of canal engineering. The Ellesmere Canal was completed in 1805, and alongside his canal responsibilities, Telford's reputation as a civil engineer meant he was constantly consulted on numerous other projects. These included water supply works for Liverpool, improvements to London's docklands and the rebuilding of London Bridge, c. 1800. Most notably, and again William Pulteney was influential, in 1801 Telford devised a master plan to improve communications in the Highlands of Scotland, a massive project that was to last some 20 years. It included the building of the Caledonian Canal along the Great Glen and redesign of sections of the Crinan Canal, some 920 miles, 1,480 kilometers, of new roads, over 1,000 new bridges, including the Craigellachie Bridge, numerous harbour improvements, including works at Aberdeen, Dundee, Peterhead, Wick, Port Mahomack and Banff, and 32 new churches. Telford also undertook highway works in the Scottish lowlands, including 184 miles, 296 kilometres, of new roads and numerous bridges, ranging from a 112 feet, 34 metres, span stone bridge across the Dee at Glendinning Kirk Gubright 1805 to 06, to the 129 feet, 39 metres, tall Cartland Crags Bridge near Lanark, 1822. Telford was consulted in 1806 by the King of Sweden about the construction of a canal between Gothenburg and Stockholm. His plans were adopted and construction of the Göta Canal began in 1810. Telford travelled to Sweden at that time to oversee some of the more important initial excavations. Many of Telford's projects were undertaken due to his role as a member of the Exchequer Loan Commission, an organ set up under the Poor Employment Act of 1817, to help finance public work projects that would generate employment. During his later years, Telford was responsible for rebuilding sections of the London to Holyhead Road, a task completed by his assistant of 10 years, John McNeill. Today, much of the route is the A5 trunked road, although the Holyhead Road diverted off the A5 along what is now parts of A45, A41 and A464 through the cities of Coventry, Birmingham and Wolverhampton. Between London and Shrewsbury, most of the work amounted to improvements. Beyond Shrewsbury, and especially beyond Langland, the work often involved building a highway from scratch. Notable features of this section of the route include the Waterloo Bridge across the River Conwy at Westerkirk, the ascent from there to Capelcurig and then the descent from the pass of Nantfrincan towards Bangor. Between Capelcurig and Bethesda, in the Ogwen Valley, Telford deviated from the original road, built by Romans during their occupation of this area. On the island of Anglesey a new embankment across the Stanley Sands to Holyhead was constructed, but the crossing of the Menai Strait was the most formidable challenge, overcome by the Menai Suspension Bridge, 1819-26. Spanning 580 feet, 180 meters, this was the longest suspension bridge of the time. Unlike modern suspension bridges, Telford used individually linked 9.5-foot, 2.9 meters, iron eye-bars for the cables. Telford also worked on the North Wales Coast Road between Chester and Bangor, including another major suspension bridge at Conwy, opened later the same year as its Menai counterpart. Further afield Telford designed a road to cross the centre of the Isle of Arran. Named the String Road, This route traverses bleak and difficult terrain to allow traffic to cross between east and west Tyrone, avoiding the circuitous coastal route. His work on improving the Glasgow-Carlisle Road, later to become the A74, has been described as a model for future engineers. Telford improved on methods for the building of macadam roads by improving the selection of stone based on thickness, taking into account traffic, alignment and slopes. The punning nickname Colossus of Rhodes was given to Telford by his friend, the eventual poet laureate, Robert Southey. Telford's reputation as a man of letters may have preceded his fame as an engineer. He had published poetry between 1779 and 1784, and an account of a tour of Scotland with Southey. His will left bequests to Southey, who would later write Telford's biography, the poet Thomas Campbell, 1777–1844, and to the publishers of the Edinburgh Encyclopedia, to which he had been a contributor. In 1821, he was elected a foreign member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. An Act of Parliament in 1823 provided a grant of £50,000 for the building of up to 40 churches and manses in communities without any church buildings, hence the alternative name, Parliamentary Church or Parliamentary Kirk. The total cost was not to exceed £1,500 on any site, and Telford was commissioned to undertake the design. He developed the simple church of T-shaped plan and two manse designs, a single-story and a two-story, adaptable to site and ground conditions, and to brick or stone construction, at £750 each. Of the 43 churches originally planned, 32 were eventually built around the Scottish Highlands and Islands, the other 11 were achieved by redoing existing buildings. The last of these churches was built in 1830. Some have been restored and are converted to private use. Other works by Telford include the street Catherine Docks, 1824–28, close to Tower Bridge in central London, where he worked with the architect Philip Hardwick, the Gloucester and Berkeley Ship Canal, today known as the Gloucester and Sharpness Canal, over bridge near Gloucester, the second Harecastle Tunnel on the Trent and Mersey Canal 1827, and the Birmingham and Liverpool Junction Canal, today part of the Shropshire Union Canal, started in May 1826 but finished, after Telford's death, in January 1835. At the time of its construction in 1829, Galton Bridge was the longest single span in the world. He also built Whitstable Harbour in Kent in 1832, in connection with the Canterbury and Whitstable Railway, with an unusual system for flashing out mud using a tidal reservoir. He also completed the Grand Trunk after James Brindley died due to being overworked. In 1820, Telford was appointed the first president of the recently formed Institution of Civil Engineers, a post he held until his death. Telford's young draughtsman and clerk 1830–34 George Turnbull in his diary states, "On the 23rd August 1834, Mr. Telford was taken seriously ill of a bilious derangement to which he had been liable. He grew worse and worse. Surgeons attended him twice a day, but it was to no avail, for he died on the 2nd September, very peacefully at about 5 p.m. His old servant James Hanscom and I were the only two in the house, 24 Abingdon Street, London, when he died. He was never married. Mr. Milne and Mr. Rickman were, no doubt, Telford's most intimate friends. I went to Mr. Milne and under his direction made all the arrangements about the house and correspondence. Telford had no blood relations that we knew of. The funeral took place on the 10th September, in Westminster Abbey. Mr. Telford was of the most genial disposition and a delightful companion. His laugh was the heartiest I ever heard. It was a pleasure to be in his society." Thomas Telford was buried in the nave of Westminster Abbey. A statue was erected to him nearby, in St Andrew's Chapel adjoining the north transept.